The red sun of Kepler 442b was setting behind the purple mountains when 12-year-old Marcus Reed decided to explore the crystal caves one more time. His parents had told him not to go there alone, but Marcus was curious about everything. That was his problem, his mother always said with a smile. New Haven Colony was small, just 300 people trying to make a life on this strange world. The adults were always busy with work, growing food, fixing machines, and talking about important things that Marcus did not understand. So he explored by himself, finding new places and interesting rocks. The crystal caves were his favorite spot. They glowed with soft blue light, and the walls made pretty sounds when the wind blew through them. Marcus had been there many times, but today felt different. Today, he heard something that was not the wind. It sounded like crying. Marcus moved deeper into the cave, following the sound. His small flashlight made dancing shadows on the crystal walls. The crying got louder as he walked further inside. Then he saw something that made him stop and stare. A girl was sitting against the cave wall, holding her arm and crying softly, but she was not like any girl Marcus had ever seen. Her skin was light blue, like the color of ice, and it glowed gently in the dark cave. Her hair was silver and seemed to move by itself, even without any wind. She wore strange clothes that looked like they were made of starlight. The girl looked up when she heard Marcus coming. Her eyes were large and golden like two small suns. She stopped crying and stared at him with fear and surprise. "Don't be scared," Marcus said softly, putting his hands up to show he meant no harm. "I won't hurt you." The girl said something in a language Marcus had never heard before. It sounded like music, but sad music. She pointed to her arm, and Marcus could see that she was hurt. Her arm was bent in a wrong way, and there was strange purple blood on her clothes. Marcus knew he should run back to the colony and tell them adults, but the girl looked so scared and hurt. What if the adults were afraid of her? What if they tried to lock her up or send her away? Marcus had heard the grown-ups talk about aliens sometimes, and they did not always sound friendly when they did. "My name is Marcus," he said, pointing to himself. Then he pointed to her. "What's your name?" The girl watched him carefully. Then she pointed to herself and said something that sounded like, "Aria." "Aria?" Marcus tried to copy the sound. "The Ming." Girl nodded and almost smiled. It was a pretty smile, even though she was still scared. Marcus looked at her hurt arm again. He remembered when he had broken his arm last year. The doctor had fixed it, but first they had to wrap it up and keep it still. Maybe he could help Aria the same way. He took off his jacket and tore it into strips, like he had seen his mother do with old sheets. Aria watched him with curious eyes. When Marcus moved closer to help her, she did not try to run away. Very carefully, Marcus wrapped the cloth around Aria's arm and tied it to a straight piece of crystal to keep it still. Aria made small sounds of pain, but she let him help her. When he was done, she looked at her arm and then at Marcus. She said something in her musical language that sounded like, "Thank you." Over the next few days, Marcus came back to the cave every day after school. He brought food from his lunch and water in his school bottle. He also took some pain medicine from his mother's first aid kit, though he felt bad about taking it without asking. Aria got better slowly. Her arm started to heal and she did not cry anymore. Marcus learned that she was very smart. She drew pictures in the sand to talk to him when words did not work. She drew a picture of the stars, and then drew herself coming from far away in a big ship that looked like a flying crystal. Marcus drew pictures too. He drew his house and his parents and the colony. He drew Earth, the planet where humans came from, even though he had never seen it himself. Aria looked very interested in all his drawings. As the days passed, they became friends. Aria taught Marcus how to make the crystals in the cave glow brighter by touching them in special ways. Marcus taught Aria some English words, and she taught him some words in her language. They played simple games and shared Marcus's food. Marcus learned that Aria's people were called the Veltar. They were peaceful and loved to learn about the universe. Aria was on her first trip to other worlds with her family when their ship had some kind of accident. She had been thrown out during the crash and had been lost for many days before Marcus found her. One evening, as Marcus was getting ready to go home, Arya grabbed his hand and pointed to the sky. Far above the clouds, Marcus could see a tiny light moving between the stars. It was getting bigger each day. Your family? Marcus asked. Arya nodded sadly. She drew a picture in the sand showing herself leaving with the ship. She would have to go home soon. Marcus felt sad too. He had never had a friend like Arya before. She was kind and smart and different from everyone else he knew. The idea of her leaving made him feel empty inside. On the last night before the rescue ship arrived, Marcus and Arya sat together in the glowing cave. Neither of them wanted to say goodbye. Marcus was trying to be brave, but his eyes were full of tears. Arya reached into her strange clothes and pulled out a small crystal that glowed with soft white light. She put it in Marcus's hand and closed his fingers around it. The crystal felt warm and seemed to beat like a heart. "This will help you find me," Arya said in careful English words she had learned from him, "when you are grown up." Marcus looked at the beautiful crystal and then at Arya's golden eyes. He felt something important happening, something that would change his life forever. "I promise," Marcus said, his young voice full of determination. "When I'm grown up, I'll find you, and I'll marry you if you want." Arya smiled and her whole face glowed brighter. She took Marcus's other hand in both of hers. "I promise too," she said. "I will wait for you, Marcus Reed." The next morning, the rescue ship landed near the cave. Marcus watched from behind the rocks as tall, glowing beings like Arya came out to take her away. As the ship lifted into the sky, Arya waved to him from a window that looked like clear crystal. Marcus waved back, holding the glowing pendant tight in his other hand. He made his promise again, speaking to the stars where Arya's ship had disappeared. "I'll find you," he whispered. "I'll keep my promise." The crystal pendant grew warm in his hand, as if it heard him and believed him too. 15 years had passed since Marcus Reed last saw Arya's glowing face through the crystal window of her rescue ship. Now 27 years old, Marcus stood on the bridge of the human colonial fleet starship Phoenix, wearing the uniform of a decorated officer. His brown hair had darkened, and his face showed the lines of someone who had seen too much war. But in his pocket, he still carried Arya's crystal pendant. It had grown dim over the years, like a dying star, but it was always warm to the touch. Sometimes late at night when he could not sleep, Marcus would hold it and remember the promise he had made as a 12-year-old boy. The galaxy had changed a lot since then. Humans had spread to dozens of worlds, building colonies and mining, stations wherever they could find resources. But this expansion had not been peaceful. There had been wars with other alien races, the Sector, the Droll Empire, and others whose names Marcus tried not to remember. Marcus had fought in many of these battles. He was good at war, which made him sad sometimes. He had hoped to be an explorer like the old Earth astronauts he had read about as a child. Instead, he had become a soldier, then an officer, then a commander who sent other young people to fight and sometimes to die. The worst part was that Marcus was starting to understand why the other alien races feared humans. His own people could be cruel and greedy. They took what they wanted and asked questions later. They called it human nature and survival of the fittest. But Marcus remembered Arya's gentle ways and wondered if there was a better path. "Commander Reed," called Lieutenant Brooks from the navigation station. "We're getting close to the mining station on Proxima 7. Should we prepare for landing?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, but stay alert. The reports say the miners are having trouble with local wildlife." As the Phoenix approached the gray planet below, Marcus thought about how different his life had become from what he had imagined as a boy. He was respected in the fleet, and his men trusted him, but he felt empty inside, like he was missing something important. The mining station on Proxima 7 was a typical human operation. Big machines tearing up the ground to find valuable metals, temporary buildings that looked ugly against the alien landscape, and workers who complained about everything. The station manager, a heavy man named Taylor, met them at the landing pad. "Commander Reed, thank goodness you're here," Taylor said, wiping sweat from his face. "These alien creatures keep attacking our mining equipment. We've lost 3 excavators this month." Marcus and his team investigated the attacks. What they found surprised him. The alien creatures were actually quite intelligent. They were trying to protect something buried deep in the mining area, some kind of crystal formation that seemed important to them. They're not just animals, Marcus told Taylor after studying the evidence. They're trying to communicate with us. Look at these patterns they've made in the rock. It's like writing. Taylor scowled. I don't care if they're writing poetry, Commander. They're stopping us from doing our job. The company wants this planet stripped clean in 6 months. Maybe we should try to talk to them first, Marcus suggested. Find out what they want. Talk? Taylor laughed. Commander, with respect, you're a soldier, not a diplomat. Just clear them out so we can get back to work. That night, Marcus walked alone around the mining camp, thinking about Taylor's words. The man was right. Marcus was a soldier. But as he looked up at the alien stars, he remembered Arya and how she had tried to communicate with him through pictures and gestures. Maybe some problems needed understanding, not fighting. The next day, against Taylor's wishes, Marcus went to meet the alien creatures. They were tall and thin, with 4 arms and skin like tree bark. When they saw Marcus approaching alone and without weapons, they did not attack. Instead, their leader made complex gestures that reminded Marcus of sign language. Marcus tried to copy the gestures. Slowly, carefully, they began to communicate. The aliens, who called themselves the Keth, showed Marcus what the humans were destroying. Deep underground was a crystal garden that had taken their people thousands of years to grow. It was not just beautiful. It was their history, their religion, their whole culture written in living crystal. Marcus felt sick. The humans were destroying something precious without even knowing it existed. We can work together, Marcus told the Keith, leader through gestures and simple drawings. You show us safe places to mine. We protect your crystal garden. The Keth leader thought for a long time. Then he made a gesture that Marcus hoped meant yes. But when Marcus returned to the camp and explained the situation to Taylor, the manager was angry. You had no right to make deals with aliens. Taylor shouted. The company doesn't care about their crystal gardens. We have quotas to meet. Then the company is wrong, Marcus said quietly. Taylor's face turned red. I'm reporting this to Fleet Command, Reed. You're supposed to protect human interests, not alien rocks. A week later, Marcus received orders to return to Fleet Headquarters. His superior, Admiral Nash, was not happy. Commander Reed, Nash said, looking at a thick file on his desk. You've been causing problems. This is the 3rd time this year you've tried to negotiate with aliens instead of following orders. Sir, in each case, negotiation worked better than force, Marcus replied. We saved lives and resources. That's not the point, Nash snapped. You're a military officer, not a peacemaker. Your job is to protect human colonies and human interests. Some of the other commanders are starting to question your loyalty. Marcus felt something cold in his stomach. My loyalty to what, sir? To humanity, of course. To our survival and expansion among the stars. That night, alone in his quarters, Marcus held Arya's pendant and thought about Admiral Nash's words. Was protecting humanity the same as making war on everyone else? Arya's people, the Veltar, were peaceful. They had saved him and his crew, once when their ship was damaged in battle. But according to Nash, Marcus should see them as competitors or threats. The pendant grew warm in his hands, and for just a moment, Marcus thought he could feel something, like Arya was somewhere far away, thinking about him too. I made you a promise, Marcus whispered to the glowing crystal. But I don't know if I'm good enough to keep it. I don't know if humanity deserves to be part of your peaceful galaxy. The pendant pulsed with light, as if it was trying to tell him something. Maybe it was telling him that the boy who had helped an injured alien girl was still inside the man who had become a soldier. Maybe it was telling him that keeping his promise was not just about finding Arya again. Maybe it was about proving that humans could be better than what they had become. Marcus looked out at the stars through his small window. Somewhere out there, Arya was waiting for him. But before he could go to her, he had work to do. He had to find a way to show the galaxy, and himself, that humanity was worth saving. The crystal pendant grew brighter, as if it agreed with his thoughts. Tomorrow, Marcus decided, he would start trying to change things. He would find a way to make humans and aliens work together instead of fighting all the time. It would be dangerous, and many people would not understand, but it was the only way he could become worthy of keeping his childhood promise. Outside his window, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if they were watching and waiting to see what he would do. 8 years had passed since Marcus began his mission to change how humans dealt with other species. Now 35 years old, he sat in a prison cell on Earth, waiting for his third court-martial in 5 years. His hair had gray streaks and his face looked tired, but his eyes still held the same determination he had shown as a 12-year-old boy. The charges this time were serious: treason, disobeying direct orders, and putting alien interests above human security, all because he had refused to destroy a Veltar research station that was studying ways to heal damaged planets. "You could have been an admiral by now," said Colonel Hayes, Marcus's old friend who had come to visit him in the military prison. "Why do you keep doing this to yourself?" Marcus touched the crystal pendant through his uniform shirt. After all these years, it still glowed softly and gave him strength. "Because someone has to prove we're better than this," Marcus said quietly. "Humans aren't just killers and thieves. We can be heroes too." Hayes shook his head. "The galaxy doesn't care about human heroes, Marcus. They just want us to stay in our corner and not bother anyone. Maybe that's because we keep giving them reasons to fear us." The court-martial went as badly as Marcus had expected. The judges were military men who believed that human survival meant human dominance. They found him guilty on all charges and sentenced him to 10 years in prison. But something unexpected happened as the guards were taking Marcus away. A messenger rushed into the courtroom with urgent news. Long-range sensors had detected something terrible approaching from the edge of the galaxy. A massive fleet of unknown ships that were destroying everything in their path. The aliens called them the Devourers, and they had already consumed 3 entire star systems. Planets, moons, space stations, even the stars themselves. Everything was being turned into fuel for their endless fleet. The attack was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Within hours, Marcus's sentence was suspended. The human government needed every experienced officer they could find, even ones they had just convicted of treason. Admiral Nash, now older and more desperate than Marcus remembered, called him to an emergency meeting. "Reed, I know we've had our differences," Nash said, looking at star charts covered with red marks showing destroyed worlds. "But you're one of our best tactical minds. We need you." Marcus studied the charts. The Devourer fleet was huge, thousands of ships moving in perfect formation. They had already defeated combined fleets from the Sectar Empire and the Droll Republic. "What about the other species?" Marcus asked. "Are we working together to fight this threat?" Nash laughed bitterly. "Working together? Marcus, they blame us for bringing the Devourers here. They think our expansion into their space somehow attracted these monsters." "Maybe it did," Marcus said thoughtfully. "Maybe the Devourers follow the sound of war and destruction. If that's true, then our fighting with each other is like ringing a dinner bell." "So what do you suggest?" Marcus pointed to a section of space where several different alien territories met. "We stop fighting each other and start fighting together. I propose a grand alliance. Humans, Veltar, Sectar, Droll, everyone." Nash stared at him. "That's impossible. Some of these species have been enemies for centuries. Then the Devourers will eat us one by one," Marcus said simply. "Admiral, I've spent 8 years learning about alien cultures. I know how to talk to them. Let me try." The first meeting was a disaster. Representatives from 12 different species gathered on a neutral space station, and within an hour they were screaming at each other in 6 different languages. The Sectar accused the humans of bringing destruction wherever they went. The Droll claimed the Veltar were too weak to be trusted in battle. Everyone had old grudges and new fears. Marcus sat quietly through all the shouting, holding Arya's pendant and thinking. Finally he stood up. "My friends," he said, his voice calm but strong enough to cut through the noise. "While we argue about the past, the Devourers are destroying our future. He activated a holographic display showing the enemy fleet's progress. Look at this. They don't care if we're human or Veltar or Sectar. To them, we're all just food. Our differences mean nothing to creatures that eat entire worlds. A Veltar representative, an elderly female with skin like starlight, leaned forward. You speak wisdom, human. But can your species be trusted? Your reputation for violence precedes you. Marcus felt his heart skip. This Veltar spoke with the same musical accent as Arya. For a moment, he wondered if Arya was somewhere in the galaxy, watching these negotiations with hope or fear. You're right to be suspicious, Marcus admitted. Humans have made many mistakes. We've been aggressive and greedy. But we've also shown that we can change, that we can be more than our worst impulses. He told them about his work over the past 8 years, how he had helped settle disputes between miners and native species, how he had prevented wars through negotiation instead of fighting, how he had been imprisoned by his own people for putting peace before profit. I have paid a price for believing that all species can work together, Marcus said, but I still believe it. And right now, it's our only hope. The Veltar representative studied Marcus with golden eyes that reminded him painfully of Arya. What do you propose? Marcus outlined his plan. Each species would contribute what they did best. Humans would provide ground troops and tactical leadership. They were the best fighters in the galaxy when they had a righteous cause. The Veltar would share their energy technology and healing abilities. The Sectar had the fastest ships. The Droll had the strongest weapons. But more than that, Marcus said, we share our knowledge completely. No secrets, no holding back. We become one fleet, one people fighting for one goal, survival. The debates went on for days. There were walkouts and threats and moments when Marcus thought the alliance would collapse before it even began. But, slowly, as reports came in of more worlds being devoured, the representatives began to see that Marcus was right. The turning point came when the Devourers attacked a Veltar colony world. The entire planet was consumed in less than 6 hours. The Veltar representative, who Marcus learned was named Elder Kala, wept openly as she received the news. My daughter was on that world, she whispered. She was studying their healing gardens. Marcus put his hand on Elder Kala's shoulder, ignoring the gasps from other representatives who had never seen a human show such gentle compassion to an alien. I'm sorry, he said quietly. But we can make sure her sacrifice means something. We can make sure no more children die like this. Elder Kala looked at Marcus with new understanding. You speak from the heart, not just the mind. Very well. The Veltar will join your alliance. One by one, the other species agreed. The greatest military alliance in galactic history was born not from conquest or politics, but from shared grief and desperate hope. The first battle against the Devourers was almost a disaster. The Allied fleet was twice as big as any force the galaxy had ever seen, but the different species had never fought together before. Communication was difficult, tactics were confused, and old prejudices almost caused friendly fire incidents. But Marcus had prepared for this. He had spent months learning about each species' military traditions and fighting styles. More importantly, he had learned about their values and dreams. We're not just fighting to survive, he broadcast to the entire fleet as the Devourers approached. We're fighting to prove that different peoples can become one people. We're fighting to show the universe that cooperation is stronger than consumption. The battle lasted 3 days. Ships from a dozen different worlds fought side by side, sharing weapons and energy, protecting each other's weaknesses and combining their strengths. Marcus coordinated the attack from a command ship crewed by members of every species in the Alliance. When the last Devourer ship was destroyed, the celebration could be heard across the galaxy. But more important than the victory was what came after. The Alliance held together. Trade agreements were signed, cultural exchanges began. Old enemies became new friends. Marcus stood on the observation deck of the command ship, watching ships from 12 different worlds flying in formation. The crystal pendant in his pocket glowed brighter than it had in years. We did it, he whispered to Arya's memory. We proved that different peoples can work together. Maybe now I'm worthy of keeping my promise to you. As if in answer, the pendant pulsed with warm light, and Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years, hope that his childhood dream might still come true. Elder Kayla joined him at the observation window. "You have given us all a great gift, Marcus Reed," she said. "You have shown us that trust can grow even in the darkest times." Marcus smiled. "I had a good teacher once. A Veltar girl who showed me that friendship has no boundaries." Elder Kayla's golden eyes sparkled with interest. "Indeed, what was her name?" "Arya," Marcus said softly. Elder Kayla's expression changed to one of amazement. "Arya of the Crystal Gardens? She is my daughter's closest friend, and she has spoken of you many times over the years." Marcus's heart stopped. She remembers." "Me? Remembers you?" Elder Kayla laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "Young human, she has never forgotten you. She has followed your career from afar, and she was one of the strongest voices urging the Veltar to join your alliance." The crystal pendant grew so bright that its light shined through Marcus's uniform. After 23 years, he was finally ready to keep his promise. 3 months after the great victory against the Devourers, Marcus Reed stood on the bridge of a Veltar diplomatic ship, watching the most beautiful world he had ever seen grow larger in the view screen. Veltara Prime looked like a jewel floating in space. Blue oceans, green continents, and cities that glowed like stars even in daylight. Marcus was 35 now, with gray in his hair and lines around his eyes from years of responsibility and worry. But inside, he felt like that 12-year-old boy again, nervous and excited about seeing Arya after 23 years apart. "She is waiting for you in the Crystal Gardens," Elder Kayla said gently, standing beside him. "That is where she has spent most of her time since we received your message." Marcus touched the pendant through his uniform. It had been glowing so brightly lately that he had to keep it covered during meetings. "Elder Kayla, what if I'm not what she remembers? What if the boy she knew is gone?" The elderly Veltar smiled with understanding. "Marcus Reed, you united 12 species who had been enemies for centuries. You convinced them to trust each other enough to fight together. That takes the same pure heart that helped an injured alien child in a cave." The ship landed in a port that looked like it was made of living crystal and flowing water. Veltar people moved gracefully through gardens filled with plants that glowed in rainbow colors. Everything was so peaceful and beautiful that Marcus felt clumsy and out of place in his military uniform. A young Veltar male approached them as they left the ship. His skin was pale gold and his silver hair moved like liquid light. "Commander Reed," he said in perfect English. "I am Joran, Arya's research partner. She asked me to escort you to the gardens." As they traveled through the Crystal City, Marcus saw wonders that took his breath away. Buildings that grew like trees, vehicles that floated on beams of light, and everywhere the gentle, musical voices of the Veltar people. Children played in parks where the flowers sang and artists created sculptures from pure energy. "Is it very different from human worlds?" Joran asked, noticing Marcus's amazement. "Very different," Marcus admitted. "We build with metal and concrete. Everything is harder, more angular." "Arya has studied human architecture," Joran said. "She finds it fascinating how you create such strength from simple materials. She says it shows the human spirit, taking basic things and making them into something greater." They came to a vast garden at the heart of the city. Crystal trees reached toward the sky, their branches singing in harmonies that made Marcus's soul feel peaceful. Paths of living light wound between pools of water so clear they looked like mirrors of the sky. And there, sitting beside a pool where crystal flowers bloomed underwater, was Arya. Marcus stopped walking, his heart pounding. She looked almost the same as he remembered, but more grown up, more graceful. Her blue skin still glowed softly, and her silver hair still moved like it was alive. She wore robes that seemed to be made of starlight and crystal, but it was her eyes that made Marcus catch his breath. The same golden eyes that had looked at him with trust and friendship all those years ago. Arya stood when she saw him, and for a long moment they just stared at each other across the garden path. 23 years collapsed into nothing, and they were just a boy and girl who had been friends when the galaxy was simpler. Marcus, Arya said softly, and her voice was like music just as he remembered. Arya, he replied, and found that his voice was shaking. They walked toward each other slowly, as if they were afraid the other might disappear like a dream. When they were close enough to touch, they stopped again. You kept your promise, Arya said, her golden eyes shining with unshed tears. You came back. I said I would, Marcus replied, though it took me longer than I hoped. You had important work to do first, Arya said. I watched you, Marcus. I saw you become the leader the galaxy needed. I saw you prove that humans could be more than conquerors. Marcus felt embarrassed. I made so many mistakes. I was a soldier for so long. I don't know if I'm the same person. You remember. Arya stepped closer and gently took his hands in hers. Her touch was warm and sent little sparks of energy through his fingers. You are exactly who I remembered, she said. The boy who helped a stranger without asking for anything in return. The boy who saw someone hurt and chose to heal instead of harm. That boy became a man who brought peace to the galaxy. They sat together by the crystal pool, talking for hours as the suns of Veltara Prime set in colors Marcus had never seen before. Arya told him about her life, how she had become a scientist studying the connections between different species, how she had advocated for the Veltar to help humans even when others were afraid, how she had never stopped hoping he would return. Marcus told her about his struggles, his doubts, his years of feeling lost and alone. He told her about the pendant and how it had given him strength in his darkest moments. I never knew if you really meant what you said, Marcus admitted. We were just children. I thought maybe you had forgotten or found someone else. Arya laughed, a sound like silver bells. Marcus Reed, I am 112 years old now by your counting. I have met many people in my long life, but none of them ever made me feel the way I felt when a human boy chose to help me instead of fear me. 112? Marcus looked shocked. But you look. We age differently than humans, Arya explained. I am still young by Veltar standards. I will live for many centuries more. She looked sad suddenly. That is why I was not sure this could work between us. Your life is so short compared to mine. Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking about this. It was true. Humans lived maybe 80 or 90 years, while Veltar lived for 800. By the time he was old and dying, Arya would still be in her prime. I don't care, he said finally. However much time we have, it's worth it. I would rather have 50 years with you than 500 years with anyone else. Arya's face glowed brighter with joy. You truly mean that? I have spent 23 years keeping one promise, Marcus said. I'm not going to break it now because of something as small as time. They stood up together, still holding hands, and Marcus felt something he had not felt since he was 12 years old. Pure, simple happiness with no fear or doubt mixed in. There is something I must tell you, Arya said, looking nervous for the first time. The reason I waited so long, for you, why I never chose another. It is not just because of childhood sentiment. What do you mean? Arya touched the pendant that hung around Marcus's neck. It flared with brilliant light at her touch. This crystal is part of a bonding pair, she explained. When I gave it to you, I was too young to understand what it meant. But as I grew older, I learned that such crystals only glow for one's true soulmate. The fact that it has glowed brighter over the years, especially as you grew into the man you were meant to be, means what? Marcus asked, though his heart was already giving him the answer. It means we were always meant to find each other again, Arya said. Not just as friends, but as partners for life. The crystal chose you for me, and me for you, before either of us knew what love really was. Marcus stared at the glowing pendant, then at Arya's beautiful, hopeful face. Everything suddenly made sense. Why he had never been able to love anyone else completely, why he had felt incomplete all these years, why the pendant had always seemed to know when he needed strength or guidance. So when I promised to marry you, Marcus said slowly, I was really promising to become your soulmate? Yes, Arya whispered. But only if you choose it freely now, as an adult who understands what it means. Marcus looked around at the crystal garden, at the beautiful alien world, at the woman who had waited over 2 decades for him to become worthy of her love. Then he looked into her golden eyes and saw his future there, different from anything he had ever imagined but more wonderful than his wildest dreams. Arya of the Crystal Gardens, Marcus said formally, going down on one knee beside the glowing pool. Will you marry me? Arya's laugh was pure joy. Marcus Reed, peacemaker of the galaxy, she replied. I thought you would never ask. The crystal pendant blazed with light so bright that it turned the entire garden into a constellation of stars. And somewhere in that light, Marcus could hear the sound of promises being kept and dreams coming true. 6 months after Marcus proposed to Arya in the Crystal Gardens, the wedding preparations had become the most important event in galactic history, not because of fancy decorations or expensive ceremonies, but because it represented something that had never happened before: the marriage of 2 people from different worlds, different species, different ways of life. The wedding would take place on a neutral space station called Harmony Point, built specifically for the occasion by the Grand Alliance. Representatives from all 12 allied species were coming, along with diplomats from dozens of other worlds who wanted to see this historic moment. But not everyone was happy about the wedding. Marcus sat in his quarters on the space station, reading messages from Earth. Some humans were angry that their greatest military hero was marrying an alien. They called him a traitor, said he was abandoning his own species for creatures that could never truly understand humanity. They don't know what they're talking about, said his friend Colonel Hayes, who had come to serve as best man. You've done more for humanity than any of them, have I? Marcus asked, looking tired. The stress of planning an interspecies wedding while also managing alliance politics was wearing on him. Sometimes I wonder if I should have stayed a simple soldier. Hayes laughed. Marcus, you were never a simple anything. Even as a kid, you were trying to make friends with aliens in caves. Meanwhile, Arya was facing her own challenges. The older Veltar believed she was making a mistake by binding herself to a human who would live such a short life compared to her own. They worried that when Marcus grew old and died, Arya would spend centuries mourning him. Child, Elder Kayla said gently as they walked through the station's gardens, are you certain this is the path you want? Love is wonderful, but grief lasts much longer. Arya touched the matching crystal pendant she now wore, the other half of the bonding pair that had chosen her and Marcus for each other. Elder Kayla, she replied, I have watched Marcus for 23 years. I have seen him grow from a kind boy into a man who changed the galaxy. If I only have 50 years with him, those 50 years will be worth more than 500 years without him. The wedding day arrived with all the chaos of a major diplomatic event. Ships from dozens of worlds filled the space around Harmony Point. Reporters from every major news network in the galaxy were broadcasting live. Security was tight because there had been threats from groups who opposed interspecies cooperation. Marcus stood at the altar wearing a special uniform that combined human military dress with Veltar ceremonial robes. He was nervous, but not about marrying Arya. He was worried that something would go wrong and ruin this moment that meant so much to both of them. Then the music began, a harmony of sounds from 12 different worlds, beautiful and strange and perfect. The doors opened, and Arya walked down the aisle wearing a dress that seemed to be made of captured starlight. Her blue skin glowed softly, and her silver hair moved like liquid light around her shoulders. But it was her smile that took Marcus's breath away. The same happy, trusting smile she had given him in the crystal cave all those years ago. As Arya reached the altar, Marcus felt all his worries disappear. This was right. This was what they were meant to do. The ceremony itself was a blend of human and Veltar traditions. They exchanged vows in both languages, promising to love and support each other across all the differences between their species. They shared water from both Earth and Veltara Prime, symbolizing the joining of their 2 worlds. When it came time to exchange rings, Marcus and Arya instead touched their crystal pendants together. The two crystals merged into one, blazing, with light so bright that everyone in the chamber had to shield their eyes. When the light faded, a single perfect crystal hung between them, pulsing gently with their combined heartbeats. "By the power of the Grand Alliance," announced the officiant, a wise being from the ancient curator species, "I pronounce you husband and wife, partners across the stars, bridge between worlds." The celebration that followed lasted 3 days. Humans and Veltar danced together to music that blended both their styles. Sectar warriors shared drinks with droll merchants. Children from a dozen different species played games together in the station's parks. But the real work began after the wedding. Marcus and Arya established the Institute for Interspecies Understanding on a beautiful world at the edge of Alliance, space. The planet had forests and oceans and crystal formations that reminded them both of where they first met. They called it New Haven, after Marcus's childhood home. The Institute became a place where people from different species could come to learn about each other. Students studied alien languages, cultures, and ways of thinking. Scientists worked together on projects that helped all species. Diplomats learned how to solve problems without fighting. Marcus and Arya worked side by side, using their unique perspectives to help others understand that being different didn't mean being enemies. Marcus brought his human determination and tactical thinking, while Arya contributed her Veltar wisdom and healing abilities. But the most amazing thing happened 3 years after their wedding. Arya became pregnant with their first child, something that should have been impossible between two such different species. The doctors were amazed. The crystals that bonded Marcus and Arya had somehow made it possible for them to have children together. Their son was born on a spring morning when the crystal trees were blooming. He looked mostly human, but his skin had a faint blue glow, and his eyes were golden like his mother's. They named him David after Marcus's grandfather, and gave him the Veltar name Kalar, which meant Bridge of Light. Little David grew up speaking both human languages and Veltar music speech. He could touch crystals and make them glow like his mother, but he also had his father's stubborn determination and curious nature. More importantly, he seemed to understand both species instinctively, as if he was born to help them work together. 2 years later, Arya gave birth to twins, a daughter who looked more like a Veltar but had human strong bones, and another son who could somehow sense what other people were feeling. Each child was unique, but all of them carried the best qualities of both their parents' species. As the years passed, Marcus and Arya's children weren't the only human Veltar hybrids. Other couples followed their example, and soon there was a whole generation of children who belonged to both species and neither, who could help their parents' peoples understand each other better. The Institute grew into a small city, then a major center of learning. Students came from across the galaxy to study there. New technologies were developed by combining human engineering with Veltar energy science. Medical advances helped extend human lifespans while improving Veltar physical strength. Marcus grew older, his hair turning completely gray and his face gaining more lines. But Arya, aging much more slowly, grew more beautiful with each passing year. Sometimes Marcus worried about the difference, but Arya always reminded him that she had chosen this path with full knowledge of what it meant. Besides, she would say with a smile, our children will carry the best of both of us into the future. Through them, our love will last for centuries. 25 years after their wedding, Marcus stood on the balcony of their home on New Haven, watching his children and grandchildren play in the crystal gardens below. David was now a respected diplomat working to expand the alliance to include new species. The twins had become scientists, discovering ways to heal damaged worlds using combined human and Veltar technology. Do you ever regret it? Arya asked, joining him on the balcony. At 60 years old, Marcus moved more slowly than before while Arya still looked like a young woman. Regret what? Marcus asked, taking her glowing hand in his wrinkled one. Keeping that promise. Changing your whole life for one moment in a cave. Marcus looked at their children below, at the thriving city around them, at the ships from dozens of different worlds landing at the spaceport. Then he looked at Arya, whose golden eyes still held the same love and trust they had shown that First day? Arya, he said softly. That promise wasn't just about you and me. It was about proving that different people can choose to love each other instead of fear each other. Look what we built together. Not just our family, but this whole new way of living. In the garden below, their youngest grandchild, a little girl with purple hair and silver eyes, was teaching a group of alien children how to make the crystal flowers sing. The sound drifted up to them, beautiful and harmonious, like voices from a dozen worlds singing together. The boy who made that promise, Marcus continued. He knew something the adults had forgotten, that kindness and understanding are stronger than fear and hatred. I'm glad I listened to him. Arya smiled and leaned against Marcus's shoulder. Above, their heads the stars shone down on New Haven, where humans and Veltar and a dozen other species lived together in peace, proving every day that love really could bridge any gap between people. The crystal around their necks pulsed gently with warm light, still glowing with the promise kept and the love shared, a beacon of hope for all the galaxy to see. And in that light, the future looked brighter than any star.